Lost in these shades of grey, till my colors come back to find me. They tell me, wake up to the light of day. Wake up, open your heart, wash your fears away. Wake up.
Welcome to New Horizons, a podcast where we explore how people make their adventures happen. I'm your host, Kathy O'Dowd.
Shining colors rain on me as I open my arms to you. Sometimes standing on your feet is the hardest thing to do.
The impetus for this podcast started with a website that I launched about 6 months ago called The Business of Adventure. I've been in the adventure space for 30 years, and I've watched it move towards increasing professionalism and also a far wider audience of people getting involved. I've watched the growth of the adventure festivals and the blogs and the Facebook groups, and right now there's an enormous surge of interest and inspiration, a certain sense that adventure is this wonderful, healthy, spiritually enriching, physically rewarding activity, and all you need to do is throw your fears to the wind and be brave enough to do it. Just do it. The thing is, I've always been fairly pragmatic as a person, and there's that question when you announce your mad scheme, and your parents get that look in their eyes, or your partner, or your friends. And eventually somebody says awkwardly, yes, but how are you going to pay for it? That's what this is about. Because I don't think there's anything wrong in asking that question. These things cost money, and they take up time. If you're giving your time to adventure, you're not giving your time to earning. And at some point you have to reckon with that. How will you pay for it? And then how will you earn your living while you're trying to do it? And not enough people talk about this. I'm a climber. I'm best known as the first woman in the world to climb Everest from both sides. It's a slightly odd record. It's a record that's been very good to me in building a career. But I don't think of myself as an Everest climber. I'm a climber. I've climbed since I was 18 at university. I started with rock climbing, progressed into mountaineering. These days I've moved from South Africa. I live in a tiny country called Andorra in the Pyrenees Mountains in Europe. And I just love all the so-called extreme sports that let me move in mountains. Multi-pitch rock climbing, alpine climbing, ski touring, canyoneering, mountain running. Everything that happens deep in the wilderness and requires an element of skill and risk management and lets me fulfill my curiosity, both about myself, can I do it, and about what I'll find by just getting out into that environment. But I have to pay for this, and I have to make a living, and I'm the sort of person who values having a reasonable house and a paid-off mortgage and a pension fund. Medical insurance. 30 years of doing this, I've never held down a full-time job. I pay for this by working as what gets called a motivational speaker on the international corporate speaking market. How do you make that happen? I've been getting more and more young people coming to me on social media asking, how do I make this happen? How do I get started? I want to be a professional adventurer. How do I do that? And I started talking to them because I wasn't sure what they meant by professional adventurer, trying to understand what they had in their head. And I've come to realize that there's no guidance, there's no insight. At least if you're a professional or your top-end amateur sport person, there's probably some kind of guidance. There was probably something happening at college. There's probably some kind of adult competitive structure that comes with coaches and competitions and national rankings and world rankings. There may even be organizations specifically designed to help an athlete transition out of the competitive athlete space into the rest of their adult career. As an adventurer, you can do what you want. You can go where you like. There's an extraordinary freedom. But on the other hand, there's no guidance, there's no structure, and there is absolutely no guarantee that anyone else is interested in what you call an adventure. You have to find your own path and then persuade other people to join you, following your story, following your path. And in the middle of all of that, you've got to work out how to pay for the adventure and how to keep the bills being paid back home, how to pay the mortgage and the pension and the health insurance. So the Business of Adventure started as a website designed to help people answer these sort of questions. And this podcast is the child of that project, because I came across Chris Stafford, who runs WISP, the Woman in Sport podcasting empire, when she interviewed me for one of the other podcast streams under WISP. And we started talking about the recorded interviews that I had with adventurers, where I asked them to tell me not about the adventure they did, but about the funding, how they paid for it, how they monetized it. And we decided to work together to create a podcast from this interview material. This is the first season of that podcast, New Horizons. What that does mean is some of our material is a little rough. These are interviews that I recorded when I was thinking of them as blog posts. So I'm still finding my way in interviewing style and audio quality, but I have talked to some fascinating people. So we felt it was worth sharing this material with you in the first season. But before we get to this season of interviews, in looking at funding, I decided that there are essentially 8 ways that adventurers manage to find money. And these 8 ways structure the way I do my interviews. I tend to talk to people about what they've done in one or more of these various funding strategies. So in this first episode, I just want to share with you an overview of what the funding strategies for adventure are. And hopefully this is interesting, whether you're simply curious about how on earth do other people pay for it, or whether you're wondering, you have something in mind, and you're trying to work out how you could possibly pay for it. So the thing about adventure funding, it's not as simple as a big corporate company gives you a nice fat check and off you go. That happens. It is one of the funding streams, but it's hard to organize. Adventure funding generally happens in one of 2 stages. There is the money you raise beforehand, which pays for you to do the adventure. But this can be tricky. You've got to persuade somebody to pay towards your adventure, pay for something that hasn't happened yet. It's simply a dream that you've come up with, and you can't absolutely guarantee it's going to succeed or that anyone else will be interested. Money beforehand can also come with a lot of obligations that you may or may not be able to fulfill. So the other way of funding adventure is afterwards. It's to take an adventure where you fund it yourself, and there are many ways in which the budgets for adventure can be reduced to make it more feasible that you can save up enough money to pay for it. And then you get your money back afterwards by creating something from the adventure that you essentially sell. And that can be a book or a film or a speech. And most adventurers are going to be using a combination of these 2. They're going to try to get money up front towards the adventure, they're going to try to recoup money afterwards, and they're going to try to use that first small adventure, which maybe they paid for themselves, as a stepping stone to prove their track record when they then start to try and raise money up front for the next big adventure. So, what are the 8 possible ways that you can find money for adventure? social influence, which is basically a fancy way of saying having an audience. If you are going to pay your own way, then it really doesn't matter whether anyone else is interested. You can do what you like, come home, share the story with your friends and family. No obligations, no responsibilities. If you're going to engage with other people and other people's money, then you are saying that you have a story worth sharing that other people are going to be interested in. But that audience is something that you have to consciously build over time. Now, we think of social influence as being how many followers people have on social media, and social media is one of the big ways of building an audience. Instagram is by far the most important social media stream in adventure because adventure is inherently a visually striking activity. Twitter is also important. LinkedIn is badly underrated because LinkedIn is where all the money people live, and that's another social media stream that you should be working on. Blogging, blog readers, podcasting, podcast listeners, all different ways of building audiences. You can monetize an audience, but to do that, whether we're talking sponsored blog posts, sponsored social media posts, you're probably going to need an audience of 100,000 followers or more. And of course, you have to be able to prove the existence of those followers. But your audience isn't just about money straight off the audience. It gives you two other things. Almost all our other funding categories need an audience. If you're trying to get a brand ambassadorship, if you're trying to get project sponsorship, the brand is probably giving you product or money in exchange for access to your followers. You need followers. If you are trying to do a business deal to help you sell a product, which can be you're looking for a publisher to get your book published, these days you are expected to bring an audience who is likely to buy the product. The days of you being an unknown and the publisher doing all the marketing, it's all over. So as soon as you approach a publisher or a speaker bureau or a sponsor, they are looking for proof that you have an audience, and they're looking for proof that your adventure is as compelling as you say it is. Remember, you're not an athlete who comes with a national ranking or titles. They're looking for some way to judge that you can do what you say you can do. And one of the things they will look at is how many other people pay attention to what you do and are interested in that story. So, social influence. More important because you need it to build an audience than because you can probably directly get money as a social influencer. Number 2, something adventurers do, the brand ambassador route. This can be called essentially personal sponsorship. So it's not about a particular project, it's about you as an ongoing adventurer. A couple of categories here. Nano influencer. You have a very small following and you may get an opportunity in campaign launches. Basically, you get a free rucksack, a free pair of shoes, and in exchange, you help them build a buzz around the launch of the product. This can be fun, but it can also be a lot of work for what is essentially a free pair of shoes. Next level up, brand ambassador, an ongoing relationship, probably with an outdoor or adventure-orientated brand. They give you a certain amount of kit for free. They may give you a discount on further purchases. You, in turn, talk up their equipment and essentially give them access to your social media following. This can be fun. It can be useful social proof of your reach. It can be a sign of professionalism when you pitch publishers or sponsors to say that you are a brand ambassador. It can also be a lot of work for not a great deal of return. Again, you're getting some free kit. You may well have owned equivalent kit already, and you're doing a lot of work for no money. At the top of this pyramid, sponsored athlete. Free kit, discounted kit, as well as money. You are promoted to the followers of the brand. You are promoting the brand to your followers. These tend to be exclusive contracts. You're unlikely to be able to work with another brand, although this may vary. Sponsored athletes often get less money than you would have thought. And this mostly exists in the extreme sports where there are still some kind of national and world ranking. There are races you can win. There are titles you can hold. Not an easy space to break into. You're probably going to have to be national level or world level in your sport. So, social influence, brand ambassador, project sponsorship. This is the one people think of, the big corporate sponsorship, the one huge check that will free you from all further financial worries. It's more complicated. Smaller outdoors and adventure brands largely don't have the money to do this. Bigger outdoor brands probably already have a stable of sponsored athletes, and those sponsored athletes will get the expedition money. So project sponsorship for adventure often comes from various corporate companies who are basically ready to gamble on something a little bit different with their marketing. They are hoping either to get their name out to general media through an association with an exciting, adventurous, and hopefully successful endeavor, or they are hoping to inspire and motivate their own staff by getting them to rally round supporting an interesting, adventurous individual or journey. Companies prepared to do this kind of marketing exist. You've got your project, but it can be so hard to find the company that's ready to support your project. You can spend weeks and months and years of your life hunting down a corporate sponsorship, only to find that it doesn't come down. It doesn't come together. They can also have unrealistic expectations about how much success they can expect, how much media coverage they can expect, what level of risk they're prepared to accept. So it can be done, but you might want to spend your time doing something with more guaranteed financial returns, even if the numbers are a little lower. So, other ways of getting money up front. Adventure grants. These are one-off financial grants or sometimes all-costs-paid opportunities for a specific adventure. They tend to fall into one of three categories. The traditional adventure grants, often sport-specific, particularly common for climbing or for polar trips. This is the one funding category where social influence doesn't matter. All that matters is your adventure proposal. But that being said, they're not there to fund your dream trip. They will have a strict set of criteria and you need to match it. They tend to want projects that are self-organized, that are not commercial, definitely not guided, and mostly to never been done before objectives. This can make it sound like it's pros only, but that's not true. A lot of them are specifically for the younger, under 18, under 25, under 35, and for people doing their first self-organized, truly adventurous expedition. So too many people don't apply because they feel they don't have the confidence or they don't have the experience. But actually, these grants exist to help you get experience. They often also offer subsidized training opportunities. So you need to be looking for adventure grants and applying for everything where you meet the criteria. There are also more modern adventure grants. These tend to be less about polar or mountaineering, more about human-powered endurance adventure, the kind of quirky personal challenge where you don't need to be a skilled extreme sports person. Again, your social influence probably doesn't matter, but the company is looking to grow their own social following and media profile through your adventure. So you will be expected to be proficient in sharing your adventure, in telling a story. There are also various kinds of all expenses paid, travel offers, competitions, which you can turn into an adventure opportunity. A lot of this is country specific. Most of them tend to come out of Australia, New Zealand, England, America, Canada. But there are some from other countries. I do run a weekly email newsletter in which I list upcoming adventure grants. It can be a useful way of keeping an eye on what's available. You can find all our links from this podcast episode in the show notes. So, what else can you do for money? Well, there's crowdfunding. This is one of our new ways of funding. Now, crowdfunding probably doesn't help you pay for the adventure itself. That feels too close to just asking your friends to pay for you to go on holiday. Crowdfunding beforehand is more likely to be fundraising for a charity that you are supporting. And you may be doing that because you're super stoked about the charity. Honestly, quite a lot of adventurers are doing it because they hope the association with the charity will make it easier for them to find other funding to pay for the adventure. Either way, certain adventures will do much better fundraising for charity than others, and you need to think about what you're truly trying to achieve. Then, crowdfunding may be used after the adventure to help you produce the product. Maybe the film, maybe the book. People are more likely to pay into a crowdfunder if they think they're actually going to get something tangible in return. Some people will crowdfund the book or the film before the adventure happens because, again, it can be easier to get media coverage or corporate sponsorship if you have a promise of a product afterwards. Now, crowdfunding relies entirely on you already having an audience. The crowdfunding platforms are not there to get strangers to pay for your project. They're there to help you get money off the people who already support you. Success in crowdfunding is all about how big an audience you have already and how well you have primed them for the crowdfunding project. The other problem with crowdfunders is you've made a whole lot of promises that you've now got to fulfill. There'll be an ambitious timeline to produce this book or produce this film. There are probably a whole lot of extras that you've promised, and a lot of people find it very hard to follow through. Crowdfunding is a very transparent way to work with money. Your failure will be very transparent and your audience may end up being cynical and bitter. So approach with care. The third thing you can do with crowdfunding is basically subsistence micropayments. You're asking for micropayments, generally on an ongoing basis, to support something, generally ongoing content, blog posts, podcast episodes, something where people get a regular return for their regular payment. I have seen a few people beginning to use these for training, for adventure races or expeditions, but you do need to think through what do you provide on a regular basis to keep people motivated to give you that regular payment. And crowdfunding, which essentially supports projects after they've happened, brings us to our last three categories of funding, which are all about monetizing the adventure afterwards. Writing. One of the great classic ways of exploiting adventure. These days, it may be the blog. Your blog can make you actual money through advertising, affiliate links, sponsored posts, but you're going to need a big readership and an up-to-the-minute understanding of SEO to make this work. But even if you can't monetize your blog, it can be a good way to build your social influence, and it's also a good way to train yourself as a writer and prove your ability to write. And that will help with our next two categories. The second one is articles. Now, I think we all know that media is in crisis. There is not a lot of money. A great many publications now simply don't pay at all. They will let you write for them for free in exchange for exposure. And those that do pay, don't pay much. You are going to have to write fast and well and frequently to earn much money. That being said, writing for exposure may work for you. It may help to build your audience. It may help to provide proof of your reach, your professionalism when it comes to looking for other kinds of funding. And then there are books. The days when you could fund an adventure by getting a huge advance from a publisher, long since gone. But books remain important. They give you a vastly extended social reach. They offer a stamp of professionalism. Having a book launched, generally by a traditional publisher that gets you national press coverage, can be your best way of getting started with speaker bureaus. Now, the publishing industry, fast changing, very complicated, too many options. Briefly, traditional publishing, the big name publishing house, the advantages, their reach, they deal with a whole lot of the practical side of publication and marketing, distribution. The downside, it's slow, it'll take 18 months, you'll only get the standard 12.5% royalty. They may do a lot less marketing than you'd hoped. You'll get about 6 weeks before they move on to the next book on their list. You're still going to have to do a lot of the marketing yourself. Second category, self-publishing. You do everything yourself, total control, and you get all the money. Downside, everything. Writing, editing, design, proofreading, printing, storage, distribution, and of course the marketing. Yes, there are online platforms that will help, but you've got to understand how to use them and you've got to pay for this. So, steep learning curve, very time consuming, your money up front. But increasing number of adventurers are doing this with great success. And finally, they're hybrid models. Smaller publishers, generally a 50-50 split on the royalties. They do production and distribution. You have to do your own editing and you'll share the marketing. What else can you do? Imagery, photography, film, television. Huge area. At one end, we're all happy snapping with phones in our pockets. At the other end, we have professionals who are artists with years of experience and training and with real athletic and adventure ability to get themselves into position to get the footage. You're never going to compete with those guys. And even they are battling to make enough money. What you do need to do is be documenting your adventures. You'll need that for your books and for your speeches and for your blog posts. If you have any hope of getting television coverage, you need to have video footage of your adventures. Adventure film festivals are a thing. They're becoming much more common. However, it is expensive to edit a documentary. You probably have to pay to enter film competitions and you probably won't win. So, good way to lose money, adventure films. Getting onto television, the holy grail, even now, for extended audience reach. Whether you're the subject of a documentary, you're the presenter of a series, extraordinarily powerful way to reach a bigger audience. And finally, looking for money, speaking, paid speaking. And this is how I pay my bills. Talking for schools, plenty of interest in having people in to promote healthy living, outdoor exercise, motivation, goal achievement. They'll probably pay you in the hundreds. Outdoor events, lots of festivals, symposiums, lecture nights. Some won't pay, some may pay travel, some will pay you in the hundreds. If you're already famous, you've done something world class, they might pay you in the low thousands. And finally, corporate talks, where the real money is. But not easy to break into this. Most adventure speakers are earning somewhere between, say, £3,000 and £10,000 or dollars for a speech. The really famous ones can be earning a good deal more than that. But that level of money demands a much higher level of professionalism. This is not just telling your story about yourself photo by photo. You need superb content, professional presentation, and it's difficult to break in. Most adventure speakers are in what gets called the motivational or inspirational speaker category. You generally need to get these kind of jobs through speaker bureaus. They act as an intermediary between speakers and companies, and they will take between 20 and 35% of the speaker fee for their work. And they are not there to make the non-famous adventurer famous. You have to have built your reputation first. You need to have had publicity at a national level already, and you need to already be able to speak and have proof of that through videos and testimonials and previous clients. So, a whole range of possibilities for funding, but deeply confusing as to how you're supposed to pull all of this together while, continuing to pay your bills day by day, plus coming up with the adventure and doing all the planning and then getting out there and executing it. So confusing, fascinating, and what can be really helpful is to listen to people who are already doing this. Talk through how it's working for them. And that's what we're going to start in with our next episode. Next time, I bring you my interview with Sarah Oaten. Sarah Oaten is a British adventurer, best known for her London to London project, which she completed in late 2015. She basically went round the Northern Hemisphere on foot and by bike and on a kayak, and the whole thing took her 4.5 years on and off and didn't work out quite the way she hoped, but made for an extraordinary adventure. She is a published author through a traditional publisher. She's a successful motivational speaker. But what she recently wanted to do was produce a film from the footage she had from the adventure. She set out to raise £40,000 on Kickstarter, and I interviewed her about the planning for that Kickstarter, how they put it together. So next time, a fascinating half-an-hour conversation about how you can use crowdfunding to help your adventure dreams come true. I hope you've enjoyed this intro episode. Please look at the show notes to find links, some interesting articles about adventure funding streams, and about the life cycle of adventure funding that you might find helpful. You can find me via the website, thebusinessofadventure.com. The Twitter is @bizofadventure, and I have a weekly newsletter that's all about adventure funding. Useful tips, news, articles, and of course, upcoming adventure grants. To find out more about me personally, my website is kathyo'dowd.com. My Instagram and Twitter are @kathyo'dowd. I'm so glad you're here for the journey. Please reach out to me on Twitter, let me know what you think, and join us next week to find out how Sarah used Kickstarter to raise £40,000. For more conversations from the world of women's sport, including articles, blogs, videos, and podcasts, visit wispsports.com. Wisp Sport Radio is the world's largest podcast network for women's sport. There are more than 750 episodes across 30 shows and a global audience of 1.5 million. You'll find it on all major podcast players such as iTunes and Google Play. And follow Wisp too on social media @Wisp Sports for regular updates and news.
Wake up to the light of day.